What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we dive back into day 22 of our free-to-play challenge here in MTG Arena, where I started out with a brand new account, worked my way up from that brand new account, and created my first competitive standard deck. Now from here, since we are on day 22, we have earned a little bit more currency. We participated in an additional quick draft. We are slowly building our gems up. That is the premium currency currently in MTG Arena. And now in today's video, we are going to be diving into a standard event. Definitely kind of one of those things that, is another great way, especially if you're not a fan of drafts and you feel like you have a pretty decent standard deck. It is just an alternative way that you can participate, earn some additional currency, get that premium, get those premium gems, which can be used to buy things in the store like bundles of packs, and or if you want, you can always buy the mastery pass, which is definitely has its benefits. Though even though like the current battle pass is currently crafted around Baldur's Gate, there are some decent things on that battle pass that you can definitely unlock and help out your overall collection and also your currency, which is definitely pretty awesome. But with that out of the way, we do have our daily wins. We do have the 15 that we can get today, though like I said in previous videos, 4 is usually kind of the ideal place that you'd probably want to grind out to, especially early on when you don't really have that many great decks. Just because after that the currency drops off dramatically. You only get like 50 gold every other win, and then in between you get some ICRs, which can be anywhere from commons to uncommons. You can even get rares and mythics, but definitely if you're not someone who wants to grind out that much, you're not really losing out when it comes to the overall gold currency. Outside of that, we did have our previous daily quest here, which is the cast 20 blue or green spells, and we picked up today getting an attack with 30 creatures, which is definitely possible because our deck is a very aggro aggressive deck that we can definitely do that with our current deck. So I'm not going to reroll this one just because the deck we have, we can definitely probably use this one. I am going to reroll the one that we really can't, complete with our current deck that we currently have, with the hopes of getting a 750 gold quest. Yet again, we got ourselves a 750 gold quest. This all happened live. This is not like me splicing together. You saw me roll it live. And now we have to cast 30 white or blue spells, which half our deck is white, so hopefully we can complete that as well when we dive into our standard event. The deck we are using, in case you want a little bit of a refresher, is a Boros aggro deck. It's probably like the more mid-range version of the deck, I would say, just because our land base is probably a little bit on the budget side comparative some other lists that you may see, but for the most part the rest of the deck list is pretty similar to those other decks that you see in this particular deck style. In the previous video or 2 videos ago, I actually went ahead and upgraded our Rakdos Anvil deck just because I have some additional currency. I did use my commons yesterday in our Pauper deck, but just because I do think the two decks that we currently have outside of our competitive deck already have all the commons and uncommons that they would have, so I didn't mind using my current commons that I had on those. But we actually upgraded the deck. We added in 2 copies of Mythic Massacre, which is definitely a card that's going to help this deck. And we could even further upgrade it further just because we can get another copy of, like, say, something like a Tenacious Underdog. Maybe get another copy of Ob Nixilis, just because we also, like I said, have 1 rare, have 1 mythic, and those are a rare and a mythic. We can even go as far as, if we wanted to, we can upgrade our land base. Get a couple, get a copy of Haunted Ridge, maybe add an Ob Nixilis. It's definitely one of those things that we can kind of pick and choose on what we want to do with it, but definitely something we can do. I probably wouldn't at this point, being a player who plays standard or maybe being on the budget side, buy additional copies of Pathways just because they are going to be rotating out in September. And I'd rather save my currency for, lands that would be around post-September. Anything from Innistrad, Midnight Hunt, and forward are the sets. And that does not include Baldur's Gate, just in case to clear up some confusion. Baldur's Gate is an alchemy-specific format, so it does our set, so it doesn't actually impact the standard whatsoever, even though there are some reprints in that set. We also have our Dimir Ninjas deck. Is yet again another deck that we can go ahead and upgrade. I'd rather focus on one than spread my currency thin. I do think that's the proper way of doing it if you want to go upgrade decks, instead of like going, okay, let's upgrade this today, upgrade this tomorrow. It's better just to kind of finish off another deck and then move on to the last deck, and then you can focus all your efforts and currency into that other deck. But with that out of the way, I am going to dive into our standard event, just because that is a good way. I'm not going to actually play in the Pauper event. I already did that yesterday. I just sometimes you get stuck on the last plate, and the last thing I did in Arena was play Historic Pauper. So I am going to dive into our event list. We're going to look down here, and we can actually go all the way down, I think, to the bottom and click standard event. I'll move my camera out of the way so you can see how much it costs for me to actually get in. And like I said, the goal of these standard events, as much as we want to get to all the way to the end, get the play-in points and whatnot, usually the goal of these standard events is at least finishing at 3 wins, just because that is 500. That's a pretty good rate of play. You get 200 gems in a pack. Any additional ones after 300 is just a plus for us, just because, you know, like 4 wins is 300 gems in a pack, and then if we get to 5 wins, we get just an additional pack. And we actually go up to 400 gems, which is more than the actual entry cost. But anywhere from here up is definitely beneficial. Even if you get to 2 wins, is definitely not that bad. Even though you only get 75 gems, you still get a pack, which is not that bad if you think about it when it comes to currency wise. Sure, maybe you spend 2,500 gems, still only get a pack, but you do get some gems out of it, so it's definitely not bad there. And like I said, we're only spending gold. We're not going to spend our gems, just because I feel like at a point, after you feel like you got your first deck built, you probably want to save your gems, use that premium currency then for other things like a mastery pass, and or maybe buy packs at a better rate, I guess, because you don't need as many gems to buy as many packs as you would gold. So definitely another thing you could do there. But with that being said, I'm going to dive in. We're going to enter in for 2,500 gold. We are going to select our Boros aggro deck. Once you submit a deck to a standard event, you can't actually change it out until you do another one. So definitely just a quick reminder, just in case. And then we're going to dive into our games, and I will probably keep the footage in. And I may do the way I did it before, where I'm going to play the games. I'm not going to really talk during the games, but then I'll go back through after I finish up recording the games, and I'll probably talk through some of the close games or some of the the games in general, just kind of give you a play-by-play, maybe talk about other things I could have done, just because I felt like I did that for the previous standard event, and it definitely felt like it was a cool way to look at when you play a particular deck, maybe look at other options we could have done, and kind of look at it from a play-by-play kind of style there. And then after that, we'll dive back in and kind of wrap up the video. All right, and here we are, game 1 of the standard event. Open in hand, pretty decent. We got 2 planes, Den of the Bugbear, Luminarch Aspirant, Kumano, Royal Eruption, and Thunder Raiju. Overall, pretty decent curve. We have 3 lands. We can pretty much play our curve. If we play Kumano turn 1, we can also then follow up with a Luminarch Aspirant. Also, we are on the draw, which is definitely unfortunate for our deck, and our deck doesn't do as well being on the draw as it is the more aggressive deck, and it wants to be aggressive. So definitely a little behind depending on what our opponent is playing. But this is a pretty easy keep, I would say, just because it is something that is definitely a good. Our opponent looks like they're also playing a version of a red-white deck, just because they do have a red-white tap land. We draw another land, which is, okay, though it is not a secondary red source. It is a third white source, which is something that we don't really need, as double red is really our only crutch in the deck, just because that is the only second, I think, double land card we have in the deck. And our opponent then also follows up with their Kumano, so we are taking 1 point of damage. Then on our second draw, we draw a Bloodthirsty Adversary, which is definitely good. This is that play of whether or not we want to be the aggressor, just because our opponent really hasn't done much, and they're actually, seems like they're the one playing behind now, because they had to play tap land turn 1, and we're able to play turn 2 untap land, and then take advantage of our second chapter of our saga. So definitely good for us. And then, like I said, it's a toss-up. It's either Luminarch or it's a Bloodthirsty Adversary, and we get it for aggressive damage. And I go ahead and I do the Luminarch just because it is a 3/3. And if they want to target it, it's definitely something that is targetable. Whether or not it is by like a Brutal Cathar, or if they have to use something like a Royal Eruption, it definitely turns off their Kumano, and they go ahead and they actually Royal Eruption. Or sorry, they Brutal Cathar here, and then I'm like, okay, well, they do that. Unfortunately, I don't have a second red source, which is the one downfall part, but then I go ahead and I actually Royal Eruption their Brutal Cathar. It would have been great if I had a secondary red source, because I could follow that up with a Kumano and then follow that up the next turn with a possible Thunder Raiju. But we get our creature back. We get it back, and we put a counter on it. So now it's a 3/3. They have their 2/2. And then they play another Brutal Cathar. So they got double Brutal Cathar in their opening hand. Then they take our 3/3. And then we're left, facing a 2/2, and we no block. Taking 2 points of damage there is not that big of a deal. Still no third red source, so it's definitely a tough play by us. And it's definitely one of those things like whether or not we want to go ahead and we cast our Kumano, which leaves 3 open mana. We cast our Bloodthirsty Adversary, which, unfortunately, if we get another source, like another red source, we can on the next turn actually pay the additional 3. And then also be able to get back, say, like a Royal Eruption, then get back our other Kumano that's underneath the Brutal Cathar. So definitely a tough choice, but I just go ahead and I think the Bloodthirsty Adversary just to be the aggressor, because then I can also put a counter on it and make it a 3/3. And it still allows us to be aggressive and whether or not they want to block. So I put the counter there, and I go ahead and I swing. There's also a play that I could sit back, but I think I'd rather be the aggressor and still be aggressive, even though they have 2 creatures staring at me. Is definitely, I think, the play when it comes to what we want to do in this situation. And then, they can always Royal Eruption, which they do. And it's just one of those things, like if I would have sat back and didn't attack with it, I would have still then just had a Luminarch Aspirant. I would have been behind on 3 damage. So we get a Kamano, or we get a Hopeful Initiate, so we're going to Hopeful Initiate, hit him for 1, and then we're also going to, get our Hopeful Initiate out, put a +1/+1 counter on it, because then it actually blocks pretty decently against their 2/2s, which puts us definitely in a good place, allows them to, has to make them slow down, whether or not, unless they have themselves a burn spell in the process. But definitely the 2/3 Hopeful Initiate blocks their board pretty well. So definitely we're looking in pretty good. We're ahead on life points as well, even though they're the one who were on the play. And we were on the draw. So I guess our opponent is debating on what they want to do, and it looks like they tweaked the list a little bit. So they decided to play Reckless Stormseeker, which is actually a pretty interesting card here, in the sense that it is a 3-mana creature, and you can put a +1/+0 buff on a creature and give it haste until end of turn, which is kind of an interesting play just because it is a card that is pretty decent. I guess their idea is maybe they play that over the 3-mana horse, and we just let the damage go because I'm not really scared of a Hopeful Initiate. Now we can play our follow-up creature, which is a Thunder and Raiju, and that puts us kind of like ahead on board now at this point because Thunder and Raiju comes in as a 4/4. We put a +1/+1 counter on Luminarch Aspirant, and now we attack in. And I believe I put another counter on our Luminarch just because now this forces them to double block, and this could let them also let in X points of damage on them. And I think they go ahead and double block a creature. I think at first they decide, I'm gonna single block, and they're like, wait, they're giving up their Luminarch Aspirant, I'm gonna double block. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll take my Brutal Cathar back, and I'll also hit you with a Kamano. So I get my Brutal Cathar back, I get my Kamano back on the battlefield, it comes back on the battlefield, hits them for 1. We're now at 10 and they're at 1. So definitely a good spot here overall. Definitely, they can also get their own Thunder and Raiju. It grows to 4. This would become a 3. That becomes damage. But they go ahead and they Valorous Stance, which is definitely, I think, something that's okay. And then, we're definitely still ahead on board. And we also get to flip our Kamano here. And the interesting part here overall is they actually, I believe, actually go ahead and attack, which is pretty crazy just because they're at 1. And that's something that feels a little bit weird. I would say that's probably a problem on their end, just because I feel like if they would have held back here, right, I could tap 4 mana, activate Den of the Bugbear, have a possibility of getting 1 in with the creature just because they only have 3 blockers. I'll have another creature from this. So I guess they were like, well, I'm just going to do my Latch Ditch attack just because I can't block everything that you could attack in with it, because I would attack him with 4 creatures to their 3 creatures. And I just play Kamano just to finish them off. I could have attacked, but I just figured just do the 1 point of damage, get it over and done with. Game 1, victory. So definitely a good game 1. So game number 2, first hand's not great, right? We open up our first hand here, and it's 3 red lands, 2 white creatures, and 2 Thunder and Raiju. So definitely not a great curve. We're also, yet again, second game in, we're also on the draw, which is definitely, unfortunate for us. But in this situation, because we have to mulligan, being on the draw is actually pretty okay because we get the card draw. So this is definitely a mulligan because we don't have our colors. Second hand, a little bit slower. We only have 3 drops and a 4 drop, and then we have 4 lands, one of them being the creature land. And I do believe I actually throw one of the planes into the deck just because I saw 3 lands, I have 3 creatures, so it's 3 playables and 3 lands is definitely very good. And 1 Den of the Bugbear is definitely awesome as well. So we draw a Luminarch Aspirant, and we go ahead and we play Den of the Bugbear, just because that's a land that comes into play tapped after the second land comes out, and we don't really have a play, so it just comes into play untapped. So they are playing mono black with snow, and they go ahead and they play Tenacious Underdog. So, definitely one of those interesting situations here, right? On turn 2, I have 2 options. I could play with fire, their Tenacious Underdog, kill it, and I prevent the fact that I take 3, but down later in the game, they can now pay that 4 mana and pay 2 life and then get it back and swing in with it with the Blitz. But I go ahead and I actually Luminarch Aspirant just because I feel like, I can grow the Luminarch Aspirant bigger than they can grow their Tenacious Underdog, so I can put more pressure on them possibly next turn. As well as next turn, I could also Brutal Cathar their Tenacious Underdog if I wanted to. So they're actually a Golgari deck at first, so I guess they didn't either have the green mana or they were slow playing it and making it seem like they were mono black, but definitely an interesting deck here. So we go ahead, and this is definitely a tough choice, right? So if I play red, I have double red for Thunder and Raiju. I know this is probably not the best to look at it. So I play red. I have enough mana for Thunder and Raiju next turn. Though it does turn off possibly of doing like a double white spell, like a Brutal Cathar followed up by a Hopeful Initiate. But I believe I played on red just because I think red is definitely the color we want to make sure we hit for that Thunder and Raiju. And then I go ahead and I believe I play Brutal Cathartic. So I take their underdog. I don't take their underdog. And this is definitely an interesting thing here, right? Like, there is a possibility that I could, put a +1/+1 counter on Luminarch Aspirant, right? And it goes to a 3/3. I could possibly swing and possibly get the trade. Or I can sit back and let that thing grow bigger and bigger. They're going to get on turn 4 here, and that's possibly like a binding turn or even removal, just because maybe they are slow playing their removal. So definitely 2 interesting plays here. But I decided to go the Brutal Cathar, which seems kind of weird now looking back at it. So I feel like that's kind of like a weird play by me. Maybe I should have done it a little bit differently. And I know this game is the game I eventually lose, just because it is like, this is more of like a mid-range to late game range, and they also get a Brutal Cathar, which they take, or they get a bind in, which they take out Brutal Cathar, so they get back their Shigeki. And it doesn't put me in a good spot here, because now we're kind of behind on value, right? Because Sagas are definitely very, very strong cards overall. And we missed the land drop, so definitely one of those things, like when you're against a deck like this, you want to make sure you hit your land drops as much as we want to hit things to do, just because we want to put as much pressure on them. And when we miss land drops, we can't do as much, right? So this turn, we can only really do a couple things overall. So we can either play with Fire, we can play Hopeful Initiate, or we can just play one of our big creatures like our Sunrise Cavalier and or Brutal Cathar, and we don't have enough lands to play our Thunder and Raiju. So I go ahead and I'm gonna get some board presence for the most part. Might as well grow the board a little bit, get a little bit wider. I decide to grow my Luminarch and attack him for 3. They're probably not gonna block with a Shigeki, just because Shigeki can do like a little trick to get like a land. And I say go, which leaves open play with Fire, so it kind of puts me on more defensive and not as aggressive. I mean, sure, I'm attacking for 3, but I held back just because I didn't want to be super aggressive and just get rid of their Tenacious Underdog. Though it would have made them want to actually have to pay life in order to replay it, which is something they may or may not want to do. It also turns off this next play. I believe they do the Shigeki thing where they actually trick Shigeki out. Oh, never mind. They actually play Topiary Stomper, and then this gets their 7th land, which kind of puts them way ahead of us just because we're still at 3 lands, which then essentially turns on their deck, and they're outpacing us with as much value they're getting. And I believe they attack just because I have a Hopeful Initiate, which is not a very good attacker here. I decide to play with Fire it. There's also a play that I could take the 3 and also take a look at what's on top. We get a red mana source, and I go ahead and I decide to Brutal Cathar their Topiary here, just because that is going to allow us to attack in right overall, and we put a counter on the Hopeful Initiate. It grows it to a 3/4. We have a 3/3 and a 3/4. They go ahead and block the Shigeki, and they take 3. Looks like we kind of got control, though the one thing is we are playing a deck that does play Snow, so the one thing that really would hurt us in this sense would be some sort of board removal. And this is, I believe, where our opponent does go ahead and they just snap a Blood on the Snow. They just top deck, I believe, or had in their hand. They were just waiting for the opportune time for us to just overcommit and get the most value. They have to really think about it for some reason. I'm not sure why. It's just an easy snap Blood on the Snow. It is possible they're playing on mobile, but now they have all this value again. They have a 4/4. They have a 1/3. And they're outpacing us land-wise. And I have 2 Thunder Raijus and a Sunrise Cavalier. Definitely not putting a lot of pressure on them. And I'm like, well, might as well swing it for 4. We'll trade up the Topiary and the Thunder Raiju, and all they're left is a Shigeki. But the only thing is with Shigeki, they can do a whole bunch of Shigeki shenanigans, just for the most part, that they're able to bounce it back to their hand, get a land onto the battlefield. They cheat on a brutal Tenacious Underdog, which is very surprising here. I guess they're being the aggressor, even though they're at 12, which is definitely interesting here. And I guess the reason why is they couldn't pay for their Shigeki, so might as well get 1 point there. They draw a card, which is definitely more value than what we got going on here. And this is definitely a game where I'm just behind the ball at the point, and there's not really much I can do. It's just, I got to throw down the best I can. I am drawing a lot of things to just keep on putting pressure, but at this point, they have a lot of control of what happens. And I'm sure they have a bunch of other cards in their hand that they can do a bunch of other things with. So I'm just trying to do my best and just kind of throw as much at their face, and hopefully they eventually it gets through at this point, because when you're an aggro deck and you fall behind like this, there's not much you really can do to get back ahead. And this is just kind of that thing we just kind of have to sit back and kind of watch it happen for the most part. There's not really, like I said, there's not really much I can do in this situation. They could Shigeki back their hand. They could wipe the board now because they have 7 mana, and they get a land out on the battlefield. They're just throwing a bunch of stuff into the graveyard, which they can just Shigeki back. And it's kind of like one of those things that I'm kind of sitting here that they can Shigeki back, some sort of board wipe. They have a Meat Hook Massacre. And at this point, this game is pretty much over with. Even if we could attack in with our Sunrise Cavaliers, we're just not going to outvalue them in the sense of what they're going to be able to do, because we can only just play one Sunrise Cavalier at a time. We can't play multiple things here just because we're so far behind on land. So we go ahead and we play a Sunrise Cavalier. There's also a point where I could have actually played like Den of the Bugbear, got a little more pressure on the battlefield that way, more effectively use my mana. But I figured I'd get some presence on the battlefield. This does give their Binding of the Old Gods a better target now. Maybe they would drop the Binding with nothing on the battlefield, or taking out our Goblin token. And now they have an Eradicator, which now kind of seals the deal, because now they have some sort of life gain. They also play Shigeki again, which also throws us behind. We don't have any removal on the battlefield that is going to kill either of those creatures, because we only have a play with fire. So at this point, we're definitely probably just going to lose. But I just go ahead, because I'm a good sport, I go ahead and finish out the game. I think I double up and I just play, Bloodthirsty Adversary and pump it. Or I actually play Sunrise Cavalier and I save back the whatchamacallit here. I swing in because I might as well trade instead of allow them to gain life and leave my Sunrise Cavalier on the battlefield, and we lose a life, they gain a life, so it's 16, we're at 12. So like I said, we're definitely just behind the ball. They have a lot of life to play with. We weren't able to put the pressure on them that we were able to do like in game one, even though our opponent was playing kind of the same deck as we were. And now they bounce back and they get a bunch of cards here that they can just get back with Shigeki. All those cards that they're dumping into the graveyard here, they're just going to be able to get back. And then yet again, they can just put the pressure on us just because they can actually go ahead and they can, get back their Tenacious Underdog turn after turn, get a card draw effect. And now we're going to lose a life as well because their Tenacious Underdog dies. We get drained one more, so we're at 8. They draw a card. So the value is definitely there for them. And then, like I said, we're just trying to do our best to put as much pressure on them. I go ahead and I Bloodthirsty Adversary. And I go ahead and I play the additional 3 to get a play with fire. I ping their Shambling Gas, and then I do 3 to their face is kind of like the play here. Not really great. This is kind of the point of the game. I'm just so far behind, grinding it out, but it is what it is at the end of the day. And now it's just a matter of time of how long it's going to take them to kind of kill us at this point, just because they can Shigeki, get back all these cards they're milling into their graveyard, and then just be able to replay them whenever they have that open mana. So I guess at the same time, too, they have to watch their life points at the same time, just because, they don't want to be too aggressive, get back a bunch of cards, and fall behind. Our opponent takes a second here to pause. I think they're counting, maybe their cards for Shigeki, and they're trying to maybe just get the right amount of cards here that they can also play one of the cards they're getting back. So they go ahead and they Shigeki, I believe, and they get back, I think 2 or 3 cards, which leaves open enough mana to actually be able to play one of those 2 or 3 cards. And they go ahead and they play Invoke Despair, which now we have to sacrifice our creature. We take 2 points of life. They're at 12. We're at 3. And this is pretty much all she wrote for this, just because they can, play a Shigeki. We kind of just draw dead. We draw Luminarch Aspirant, but that's not going to help us in this position, just because they can bind in our creature. They're going to gain another life. We could activate Den of the Bugbear, swing in for 4. Their creature dies, we go to 2. And then, they can get back. Maybe they have another Shigeki they can get back. It's definitely one of those things that this game was definitely one of the that we didn't start out aggressive. It definitely hurt us in the long run, just because against a deck like this, we want to make sure we're being aggressive on turns, 1 through 3, and because we really didn't get started until turn 3, we definitely fell behind. So game number 3, definitely a pretty decent hand. It is a little bit on the aggressive side because we only have 2 lands, but I do think that we do have the aggressiveness that we want. Yet again, we're on the draw, which is definitely kind of interesting. I think I was on the draw almost every single game this tournament, which is definitely unfortunate, just because this deck does definitely take advantage when it's on the play. So we're on the draw. Definitely a challenge in position to be in, but that's definitely a benefit to keep a 2-lander hand. They go ahead and they play a Hopeful Initiate. We get a Den of the Bugbear. We say go, just kind of see what they're going to do on their second turn. They play a red. They play their Bloodthirsty Adversary, and this is definitely a tough part, because a part of me is like, well, okay, so I can kill their Bloodthirsty Adversary. They swing in for 1, but then they keep the Hopeful Initiate, and if they follow that up next turn with something, then they could possibly, grow their Hopeful Initiate out of range of our removal. I could also get rid of the Bloodthirsty Adversary. I could get rid of the Hopeful Initiate. We could hit for 2. It is a little bit more aggressive, but once Bloodthirsty Adversary is played, it doesn't really grow anymore. It's just another creature. So I think I believe I go ahead and I play with fire. their Hopeful Initiate while I still have removal to do so. Just because I thought at first maybe I should get rid of their Bloodthirsty Adversary because their Hopeful Initiate doesn't grow. But I figured this was the better play. And then I play my Needle Verge Pathway on... I cancel, and then I play my White Land, and I play my Bloodthirsty Adversary. And I swing back in. I could also sit back and keep my Bloodthirsty Adversary, as defense and kind of wait and see what they do. They get their third land. They play Sunrise Cavalier. So we're definitely behind the ball here because they're the more aggressive, open in hand because they have more things to do. And then I sit here and I think for a minute. It's like, do I play white? Do I play red? The reason why you would play white there is because I could play like a Hopeful Initiate. And then I could sit back and grow. I could sit back and keep defensive, but I go ahead and attack, which is definitely kind of an interesting play. There's definitely a reason that I could sit back and I could also, keep those both back and actually be blockers and double block something. Just because, they follow that up with another Sunrise Cavalier. So we're definitely behind the ball. Not really any good blocks there, just because, that has trample. This is going to die. So that's kind of like the downfall of us being aggressive because now they swung in for 8 points of damage and we're already out 5. So definitely in the range of a lot of removal, and we just kind of fled out with Brutal Cathars and no land. And the only thing I can really do here is get rid of a Sunrise Cavalier and say go. And I don't know. I decided to be aggressive and attack with 2 creatures. We're at 5. I probably should have held back the attacks because now if they remove any of our creatures, anything grows, we're just kind of on the back foot and we have to double block here and they get back a Sunrise Cavalier. We're just definitely just playing. We're just squirming for our defenses right now. Play another Brutal Cathar. We would get back a Sunrise Cavalier. And not going to attack, I believe. Because we're at 2. So all they need is a play with fire. And I believe they have a Royal Eruption. And they kind of take a game first before they do it to us. And then we're dead to a Royal Eruption. So definitely a hand where it's unfortunate, where they just had we're playing against a mirror matchup and they just had the better aggressive deck than we do. And it's definitely one of those things that just happens from time to time. And it's an unfortunate part of also being on the draw, especially with a deck that's trying to be aggressive. 4, I believe. Definitely, a little bit of a over full hand of lands, but definitely keepable because this literally has all the lands we would need really to play everything in our deck. We have double red, we have double white. And we also have, some pretty decent early game, so definitely not that bad overall. So we go ahead and we keep. And we're still also on the play, or on the draw. So definitely kind of weird that we're just on the draw. We draw a Kamana, which is great. Allows us to kind of ping him for a point of damage and kind of be the aggressor in a little bit, just because we put more pressure on the battlefield a lot quicker, just because they had to play a land in the battlefield tapped. And it looks like there's some sort of Mardu. So they play Gyada. And this definitely changes up our plan, right? So we could play a creature. We could then, be a bigger creature right now. But the thing with Gyada is now it's an angel, and every angel they play after her will become into the battlefield with that 1+1/+1 for each other angel on the battlefield. And the thing is, we don't want to be outsized because we're a deck that is aggressive, but we are very small initially. So this is kind of that thing that I waste that +1/+1 counter on a creature, and I take out their Gyada just because that is some advantage. And like I said, I don't want to fall behind at this point. So they look like they're thinking about what they want to do here because we took out their Gyada. They play another tap land, so they are playing Mardu, which is definitely interesting. And it's definitely one of those things that is a downside, right? When you're a 3-color land deck, having lands that come into the battlefield tapped this early definitely throws you like a couple turns behind, and kind of throws you behind a little bit. Even though we're not being super aggressive right now. They're very limited on what they can do because they only have 2 mana available to them, and they have to wait a whole extra turn to get that 3rd mana that they would normally have the turn prior. So, we're definitely doing okay. And our Saga is transforming, and there is some stick, so they do have something. And I'm just going to be aggressive, and I'm just going to play a Bloodthirsty Adversary, which allows me to be the aggressor, so I can attack in with 2 creatures this turn. And it looks like they're looking at our creatures real quick, and they're trying to figure out which one they want to remove because it looks like they have some sort of removal, whether it's a destroy target creature. And it's definitely one of those interesting things that they're just really trying to figure out what they want to do. They're thinking a little bit. And they just go ahead and they Cathartic Pyre our Bloodthirsty Adversary, which is definitely interesting, right? So a lot of times when you see like a Cathartic Pyre, it's a pretty decent removal spell, but there's also that secondary utility that you can discard cards and you can actually draw extra cards. And I do think that's definitely one of those things that it looks like they may be playing some sort of Mardu Reanimator possibly. It's definitely hard to tell exactly because they have an Angel, and I'm not sure if there's a Mardu Angels deck, but definitely interesting there, as I think the Etching is definitely something you want to get rid of because anything that dies by a source that we control actually gets exiled, so you wouldn't get anything back from the graveyard if you did that. And I just go ahead and I Bloodthirsty. I play Luminarch, and I actually play Etching, and I put a +1/+1 counter on it. I swing for 3. They're at 16, and we say go. Just because we're kind of waiting and seeing. I don't know if they have some sort of Meathook Massacre here. That would actually be pretty okay. All right, so we get our 5th land, and that allows us to Bloodthirst the Adversary and kick something back from the graveyard, which allows us to just be that much more aggressive. And our opponent just goes ahead and scoops at this point, which comes to think that they probably had a play because there was some stick on their previous turn, but I guess they felt like they were falling behind, that there would be no way for them to catch up, just because I guess maybe they don't have any way to remove the board. So they just go ahead and scoop when they're at 16 and we're at 20. We would have gotten back our Royal Eruption. We would have used that hit the Giada, which would have hit them for 3, and then we would hit for 3, 6, 7, 8. So we would have hit them for 11. They would be at 5. So definitely a position that definitely doesn't favor them. So overall, not a bad actually game number 4. We're at 2-2. Definitely not bad overall in the tournament. So we can go game number 5 here, and we're on the play, which is definitely the first out of 4 games that we played, which is definitely good. Our hand is pretty keepable. We have 2 Hopeful Initiates, we have 1 Play with Fire, 1 Royal Eruption, and 1 Sunrise Cavalier. So we have like a turn 1 play into a removal on turn 2, and then hopefully we draw that 3rd land by the time that rolls around. And then we play Sunrise Cavalier, which grows our Hopeful Initiate. So definitely not a bad hand to say the least. So we play this on white, which is kind of unfortunate because we do like our double red, and our pathways kind of help us fix that in the deck. It looks like they are some sort of mono green, which, this is definitely a good card that they can block with it and then sack it and then also draw a card. We draw a white Mana Source, which is now looking bad in that regard because now it's like, we only have... We have double white, we have single red, which is definitely unfortunate. And we're going to play a second Hopeful Initiate and kind of set ourselves up for a Sunrise Cavalier the next turn, because that will grow both our Hopeful Initiates. They say go. And we're going to actually burn their face, because that allows us to scry and keep what we want on the top or bottom. We get a Bloodthirsty Adversary, which we keep. Definitely a strong card here. Allows us to kind of be aggressive the following turn, and also set ourselves up to be even more aggressive the turn after that if we want to wait until we get a land. We double trigger. So our training is now up to, these are 2 3s, and we have a 3/3 trample. They decide to block, which they absorb 2 of the damage, and they get the sack, and then also put a land onto the battlefield tapped. So definitely not the most ideal. There's definitely one of those things that I could have thought about. I could have forced them to sack last turn, got that additional 2 points of damage in. It's definitely one of those things, but I figured I'd do it to the face, put more pressure on them to then follow that up. And now they go ahead and they actually Old Growth Troll, which is definitely very strong for them because it is a 4/4 and it definitely blocks very well against this. And they are playing Snow Mana, which sets up their next spell here. And it looks like they go ahead and they actually Blizzard Ball because we're tapped out and we can't really do anything about it. So their Old Growth Troll dies. We draw our 3rd Hopeful Initiate, which is not something you want to see in this position just because Hopeful Initiate's good like as an early drop, and it's something that gets better as the game goes on. But this is where we want to draw those bigger creatures of our deck. Just because it will allow us to kind of be more aggressive. And Hopeful Initiate does not allow us to really do that. So we decide to play it. We think about playing it, and then we go ahead and I thought about for a second for playing Bloodthirsty Adversary, but I decided to Hopeful Initiate. And I actually decide to attack because I'm thinking to myself, I can Royal Eruption that out of the way, maybe get some of that additional points of damage in, maybe they don't have a follow-up play. And now we have 2 Hopeful Initiates out on the battlefield. So definitely not a bad play, though it does give them access to double green, so now they have technically 5 mana if they want to use it. Now they have 6 mana, and they play it Invoke the Ancients, which definitely throws us now behind because now they have these 2 big 4/5s that we really can't do anything with. We now have a Sunrise Cavalier, which is not great because now it doesn't really attack in, so we sit back and we say no. We're definitely now behind because we really can't kill 4/5s unless we get a Brutal Cathar that can eat them. And they play Seeka's Chariot, so now there's more presence on the battlefield, which is definitely good for them. And then they say go. We draw Red Mana Source, which is not great. And I don't know, I do a risky attack, or never mind, this is not to try and do a dumb attack. just because I was thinking for a second and I decided not to. They have some sort of stick. Not really sure what's happening. We decided to put a counter on our Hopeful Initiate. There's also a reason why I could put it on my Sunrise Cavalier, make it a 4/4. It blocks pretty well. But really, once they got these 4/5s, it definitely was game over for us. We sit back. I decide to block, and now looking back on this, is probably a misplay that I made because I double block, and my thought process here is I can double block and I can get rid of like the Rasika's Chariot. But the problem is I remove the +1/+1 counters, and now they essentially are 1/2s, and now cats kill them and they don't kill cats. So definitely not, a very good block there. Maybe I should have done maybe I should have done, I don't know. Maybe I should have blocked just with a Sunrise Cavalier and taken the rest. It's definitely kind of one of those things. And I believe this is where they go ahead and they use one of their fight spells here, the one that they can kick and do additional stuff with, and definitely kind of help and blows us out even more. The other thing too is I don't actually have to play, do this at this point. I decide to, which is also probably not the play because they are fighting the creatures. So definitely one of those things that I probably shouldn't have done because that shrinks both of them and now they're both dead. So that's kind of like a misplay on my end. Because they're killing one, and I'm like, well, I can't actually get rid of the chariot anymore. Like I said, the thing was, like, probably didn't have to do that, and I could have sat back and attacked, and maybe got rid of the chariot on their turn or something. I know they also play their Dryad. We draw Red Manosaurus. We can now play our Bloodthirsty Adversary, but we're so far behind on the board that the game's not even close. At this point, we're at 10. They're at 16. We can get back a Royal Eruption. We could just do it to their face, but at this point, it doesn't even matter. So, I do it to their Dryad. I swing for 7. I just kind of scoop. And it's unfortunate. It's definitely one of those things that, we didn't draw the right cards to kind of keep up. This is the one game where I think drawing Brutal Cathar would have been a plus because we would have eaten their token. The token would just vanish, and even if they got rid of the Brutal Cathar, we still got rid of the token. So definitely not a great, game number 5. And we fall to 2 and 3 in the tournament, which is definitely unfortunate. But overall, it's definitely one of those things. We get 1 game on the play, 4 games on the draw, and we still at least got 2 wins, which is definitely good, I think, overall for the deck. And we still walked away with, 75 gems and a pack. So I only had 2 wins at this point. So I actually decided to go ahead and actually jump into some ranked ladder because I was gold 1 at this point. So I decided to jump into ranked ladder and just kind of get my extra daily wins. I figured that maybe I can also get to platinum in this point. So we jump into game 1. We're actually on the play again, or on the draw again, which is kind of ironic, right? We've now played 6 games and we've been on the draw 5 of the 6 games, which is definitely not great. But we draw an okay hand to kind of be okay because we have Lumeric Aspirant, Play with Fire, and Royal Eruption. So we definitely have some decent cards, but not great cards. Our opponent's playing something mono white. So turn 1, Usher the Fallen. So it looks like mono white, like classic mono white with Snowlands. And we say go. We kind of want to wait and see what they do here, just because they only have a white mana source. And we want to see, we let them attack, right? Because this is the thing that we want to do. We want them to attack and see what they do to follow that up, right? Do they boast? Do they not boast? And they decide to boast. So this technically wastes their turn, which is definitely good, right? Because now they're behind. Because now they aren't putting any more pressure on the board other than their 2/1. They're putting a 1/1 on the battlefield, but we definitely deal with that. So they put a 2/1 on the battlefield. So we play a 5 their Brutal Cathar. We take 0, or their Usher the Fallen. So we take 0. We now play a Luminarch Aspirant. We put a +1/+1 counter on it. So now it's a 2/2. So it blocks their 1/1 token. And now we're just looking for a follow-up play at this point. And they get their 3rd land. So definitely could be a little bit anything. It's Maul of the Skyclave. So definitely good for us, I think. Because it's a 3/3. Our Luminarch Aspirant next turn is going to be a 3/3. Definitely not a bad play for us. We also draw Hopeful Initiate, which now eats, the Maul of the Skyclaves, and we're able to put counters on things. So we definitely do Maul of the Skyclaves. We can definitely play Luminarch Aspirant and Hopeful Initiate this turn, and or even putting more pressure on our opponent. So we put both counters on the Luminarch. Now we're attacking for 4. They're only attacking for 3, so we're definitely putting more pressure on them. And they play their 4th land. Definitely still good. They play Intrepid Adversary. Good card for them because this now allows them to use their 2 additional mana to pump their team. So I have a 4/4 and a 4/2. Now they're swinging for 4, and we're only swinging for 4 as well. And we really don't want to attack into a Intrepid Adversary. There's a reason I could play, I could play the Thunder Raiju, but it would die to the Intrepid Adversary unless I put tokens on it. But we get rid of their Intrepid Adversary and just kind of start spreading the wealth of counters. So we're swinging now for 8 points of damage, 9 points of damage, I would say, with the +1/+1 counter. And there was also a reason that I could also play Bloodthirsty Adversary there, but I decided to hold it back because what if we draw our 5th land? We can then play it on the following turn, and now it comes in the battlefield, and we can play another one of our spells we already cast once this game. And now they play Guidant Voice, which is definitely an interesting play, right? It makes it a 4/4, and they get the 3 mana card with Learn that gives them creature additional 2 +1/+1 counters and vigilance. And then they also play the card that gives their creature vigilance on the card that has Summon and Sickness. So that's definitely a misplay on them, right? I feel like they probably should have done it differently if they already had both cards in their hand. They probably should have put the +1/+1 counter with the vigilance on their flyer, swung in to do 4 points of damage with us, and then just use their other card that learned and put it on their Luminarch Aspirant if that's how they want to spread around their counters. And they sit back, so definitely good for us, right? Because that puts more pressure on us, or puts more pressure on them, because now we can attack in more aggressively. We still have our counters on Hopeful Initiate and all our other creatures we can always remove and actually just kill their Maulus Cyclaves, and all they have now is a 3/3. So definitely, we're in a good spot here because we can be the aggressor. And I think for a minute, and then I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to actually remove my counters and do that because it's the most logical to get rid of the flyer. Their creature now doesn't have first strike, and we remove 1 and 1 because we can grow Hopeful Initiate, and then we can sit home on this one when it comes to attacks. There's also, I make a small little mess up here. I put double counters on Hopeful Initiate. I probably should have put the other counter on Luminarch Aspirant because now they can double block and trade for my Luminarch Aspirant. That was a misplay by me because our Hopeful Initiate would have grown anyway from the counter that we would have played here, and this would have been a 5/5 and this would have been a 4/5, so it would have been the same, but I messed that up. And we kill their Luminarch because that's just going to grow their creatures. And we're looking pretty good here regardless of that misplay, just because they're at 3 and we're at 13. And they really, unless they can kill us this turn, they really can't put that much pressure on us to do so. And they're actually thinking for a minute, and they decide to go with Intrepid Adversary. Great play, makes their board bigger. We really can't attack into it unless we want to let them gain life. And they go ahead yet again, and they do the weird thing of they put a +1/+1 counter on their 5/3 with lifelink, right? Which is definitely kind of like the thing you don't want to do again, because it's a card that gives the creature vigilance at the end of turn, so allows your creature going to attack in with it that doesn't have Summon and Sickness to attack. And which they could have actually, swung it for 5, which would have put more pressure on us, and that would have put us to 7, which is definitely, a better position for them from being behind, and their creature would have still been back on defense. But I go ahead and I actually Bloodthirsty Adversary and I Royal Eruption, and I just decided to Royal Eruption their face. I feel like this is a more obvious play. I mean, I could have done the play where I Royal Eruption their Intrepid Adversary, swing with everything kind of thing, and kind of done it that way, but I figured just get it over and done with, and we go up to gold rank with 2 progress away from platinum. All right, so we go into the next game here. We're on the draw again, which is great. Aggro deck, we're on the draw, feels great. No idea. I think that's technically 6 games on the draw, 1 game on the play. So definitely not good for us being the aggressor deck. But keepable hand here, 1 white source, 2 red sources, Kamano, Adversary, Sunrise Cavalier into Raiju. All we really need is that 4th land, and we're good to go. Our curve is playable. And it looks like we're playing mono red goblins. So definitely not a bad matchup. They're also aggressive though. So definitely something that we have to make sure we're being even more aggressive. And we get turn 1 Kamano, so we keep up with damage. So we're both at 19. So definitely good there. We actually drew our 4th land source, which also puts us ahead, overall, just because, that allows us to play, Thunder and Raiju on turn 4. I was about to play double red, but I was like, let me play my white source. We'll play Bloodthirsty Adversary, get a +1/+1 counter. We'll swing it for 3. Because the worst they can do is they can pump once next turn, but they're not going to get the extra 1/1 goblin, and they swing it for 5, which I was not worried about in this situation, because next turn after that, our Kamano then gets a chapter 3, we get the 2/2, and then we also have a Sunrise Cavalier, so we're swinging even more aggressive. So they go ahead, they only swing for 3, and they leave 2 mana open, which means I thought they were actually going to play something, but they actually hold back, and looks like they missed a land drop. So definitely good for us being the aggressive deck and being on curve, even though we drew a 5th land, which is not great, but definitely not that bad. So we play our Sunrise Cavalier, and they go ahead and they play with fire our Etchin. which is also good because that means they're not doing to our face, and that doesn't mean they fix the top card of their library. So if they're missing a land drop, it gives them more of a, they don't know what their top card is. If they had a land, they could probably keep it. If they didn't have a land, they probably scoop. They play another Javelineer. They have 4 creatures on the battlefield, still missing land drop here, and they're about to attack for 1, or they attack for 2. It was like they hesitated, they didn't. And this is also yet again very weird, right? So you're behind on board, and you're definitely not the aggressor because we're the one with the bigger creatures. I don't think you make that play if I was them. Just because, you want to keep blockers back. We only have 1 creature with trample. You could technically double block this. You'd chump block this, and then we only have 1 creature. We're not putting as much pressure on you, allowing you to catch back up. So definitely kind of interesting there. But we have 4th land. We have Thunder and Raiju, which is also really good for us just because, we're putting even more pressure on them. I think they just go ahead and scoop, and we win the game just because this turn with Thunder and Raiju, plus our creatures, we would attack in for at least 7 points here plus the additional 3, which is exactly 10. That means they have to block with their goblin here, but they would also take in the additional 2 damage here. So definitely a really close thing, but yet again we come out on top and win, which allows us to get to then platinum rank 4, which is definitely very good overall. Even with us being on the draw so many games, getting to platinum was definitely a nice thing to do, even though we didn't do so well in our event. All right, and we are back to the main title screen after playing in our event, which really didn't go super successful, which is unfortunate, but it is sometimes the way it is. I do feel like that part of what happened is we just didn't get good hands for also being on the draw when it comes to being on the play. Our deck is definitely a deck that thrives when it's on the play as compared to when it's on the draw. So we ended up walking away, getting a pack, getting a little bit of gems, but nothing super great. We're only at 1,055, pretty far away still from buying the Mastery Pass within the challenge time frame. Though we did get 1 pack of New Capenna and Baldur's Gate because we leveled up our Mastery Pass. We also got a pack of New Capenna because we got it from winning in the event. So we're gonna open the 1 pack of Baldur's Gate. We're gonna open the 1 pack of New Capenna, just kind of see what we got. We got a common, uncommon, wild card, and a random rare that I could care less about because it is alchemy. And then we got the 2nd pack here of New Capenna, which is definitely something that I would rather, open. Overall, pretty decent cards, a couple cards that we don't have copies of from New Capenna just because we didn't, start this challenge when New Capenna was the Mastery Pass. So we didn't take advantage of that. And then we also got ourselves a nice Triumph, which is definitely good, especially it's going to be a good land if we're looking to play 3 colors at any point within this deck. And we also got a little bit of Vault Progress here with our rare wild card and a little bit for our uncommon. So we need 1 more pack and we get another rare wild card. We have 2 progress points in our uncommon. And we're now sitting at 1 common, 18 uncommons, 1 rare, and 1 mythic, which I think I am going to take and go into my Rakdos Anvil deck. And we're going to make some upgrades here. We're going to add in, I think, a 2nd copy of Ob Nixilis would be a nice add to the deck. So we're going to craft a 2nd copy of Ob Nixilis. So we'll craft that, which is definitely good. And I do think what I'm going to do with this deck compared to maybe go with Tenacious Underdog is I actually am going to craft the lands because I do think lands are super important when it comes to decks just because they'll help the deck overall perform better. So we crafted those 2 cards, and we will actually go into our search, and we will search for Ob Nixilis. Turn this off. I'm not sure why he's not popping up. We can just do this real quick and then make it a lot easier. So we'll get our 2nd copy of Ob Nixilis, and we'll get our 2nd copy of Haunted Ridge, which should be right around here somewhere as well. So we'll add that to the deck, and then we go back into our deck itself. And what I'll probably do to actually get the copy of Ob Nixilis is I'll probably actually cut 1 of our reactors here just to kind of fill it that way. Reactor's still a great card for our deck, but I think Ob Nixilis is slightly better. And then for the land, I think I'll actually go ahead and just cut out what it looks like to be mostly a red deck with a splat with it's actually, mostly red with a little bit of black. So I can cut probably a mountain here and be okay. Or I could probably... we'll cut a swamp, and I think we'll be fine. But that fixes up our deck a little bit more. We used our wild cards now, so we don't have any rares and or mythics. And we're, this is kind of like another way of going about building a deck when it comes to slowly progressing it, finding avenues to actually go ahead and upgrade. I just realized I am also blocking it, so you can't really see the full deck, but this is definitely a way to kind of go about, building a deck slowly over time. I think 2 copies of Ob Nixilis is probably a nice sweet amount for this Anvil deck, just because, it's just a nice add to the deck, but it's not a necessary way for the deck to win, as we really want to make sure we hit our artifacts and add in more cards that aren't artifacts are not good for what the deck is trying to do. So whether or not this deck kind of shifts a little bit, do we really want to play Tenacious Underdog is something that we can always look into and kind of figure out from there. Maybe we actually cut it and then we add in back our other Thunder, our Dragon Spark Reactor, which is a possibility. And the only thing we really do with our wild cards from here on out is probably clean up the land base. For the most part, it's definitely one of those things that, this deck could use like creature lands, but, with them only being around for another month or so in Arena, there's probably no point in really crafting them, especially if you're looking to, somewhat future-proof the deck overall. But I do think this deck is definitely coming along pretty good. I do think it probably could even be playable in a competitive standpoint, slowly building over time. I think Anvil decks are like a very good budget deck to start out with, just because there are a lot of cards from Kamigawa that are commons and uncommons that get the deck kind of going, and then there's just always like adding those rares and mythics just make the deck that much better. Like, the deck is playable probably without Meathook Massacre. You could play Warlock class if you want to. If you don't want to play a card from D&D from last year, you can always probably just remove it and just kind of hopefully get lucky and get your Oni Cult Anvils and stuff like that. But still, nonetheless, definitely a good deck. I'll leave this updated list down in the description below if you guys want to copy that. Maybe I'll also add my Boros aggro deck just because, maybe you want to get the full list. Maybe take a look at it, maybe make your own tweaks to it and kind of see what's going on there. But guys, with that being said, I mean, this is definitely, shaping up to be a pretty decent, I think, free-to-play challenge. Everything that I'm doing from here is really just a stretch goal. This would just be things I'd probably do as a player in general when it comes to trying to do my best with what I have currency-wise. It's definitely one of those things that the game does benefit if you do spend money, but it's definitely playable even if you don't. It does just take that little bit extra time and grinding. It's one of those things that if I really wanted to, I could probably sit here and grind out the other 15 games that we got for our daily wins, maximize our ICRs that we get here, as well as, get that additional experience around that. The other thing to kind of note real quick, just because I didn't do too well in our event, is I actually did go ahead and play the standard event. So I actually went ahead and I am Platinum 4 in both constructed and limited, which is definitely awesome. Hitting platinum both for the month is definitely great, just because, like I said, I think in prior months, platinum gets you the most amount of gold, both card styles, as well as 3 packs. So definitely getting 6 packs right here, even if I don't go a rank any higher, is definitely good. Getting 2,000 gold, and then getting, technically, I think you just get the same art. I don't think they give you alternate arts depending on if you get 4 of them in theory, just because it doesn't go up more than 2. But, getting that additional, currency, additional packs is definitely good, even if it's Baldur's Gate. 6 packs is a guaranteed rare wild card with the chances of opening additional wild cards within the pack, so that's definitely good there. But with that being said, guys, if you like the video, definitely hit that like button. Definitely lets me know you guys like these type of things. I am trying to think of what to do post this challenge. I am thinking maybe, depending on whether or not we get a standard 2023 playlist, maybe we'll do like a series where I play decks that are rotating out of the format, that will not be, even if they're not the, even if like the deck color is still playable, that deck is not going to look the same as it is currently in standard. I was thinking about that. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below about that. If you like the video, hit that like button. It definitely helps out a lot. If you're new here, you want to post new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Just want to give a special shout out to the channel members here on my YouTube channel. You can also become a channel member yourself down below the video, hitting that join button. It definitely helps out a lot, and I just appreciate you guys for your support.